Welcome into the Bear Squad Show. I'm Joe George, post-game host. Is Caleb Williams primed for a big payday in 2027?
I'm Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears. The clock is ticking on a potential Tremaine Edmunds deal. Feels like something's got to happen sooner rather than later.
Hey guys, Taylor Dahl here of Making Monsters. Legal tampering and free agency just around the corner. What do the Bears need and how much can we expect to happen this free agency?
Bear down, Chicago. It's the Bears Squad. Everything Chicago Bears every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Windy City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From Soldier Field to the next great chapter, the Bears Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Bear Squad Show here on the Locked On Bears YouTube and audio channels. Joe George, Lauren Cox, and Taylor Dahl here with you for the next hour as we discuss Caleb Williams' future, maybe getting paid next offseason, what that looks like, what he needs to improve on to feel fully confident in that free agency. The illegal tampering period now less than a week away officially, which is wild to say. Tremaine Edmunds may actually have some trade value and combine standouts as well on today's show. But guys, I was reading the Sun-Times story that Ryan Poles was doing an interview with them, and he talked about planning for the future and hoping to have a big quarterback contract for Caleb Williams. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic for next offseason in which you have Caleb, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Bo Nix, all guys that feel like shoo-ins to get paid. No quarterbacks this offseason, most likely, but next offseason, a lot of them. So, Lauren, I'm just curious with where you're at today, how you feel about looking a year ahead of fifth-year extension, long-term contract, $60 million maybe. Where are you at with Caleb's future as of this moment?
Yeah, I think as soon as you are 100% certain he is the guy, the long-term answer, like you want to lock him in as soon as possible. And like you can't technically like even lock him in today, even if you're 100% certain. And like I think we all feel pretty confident in who he's going to be. We just need to see it for one more season to say, all right, yep, this is continuing on that track. But like if he even, I don't even know that he has to get a lot better than what he was this past season. Even if he was fairly similar for just one more year. So now you've seen 2 years of it in Ben Johnson's offense and 3 years of his career, that it wasn't like just enough to prove that it wasn't one good year, right? But it's been like 2 full good years of some quality Caleb Williams. Then to me, I'm ready to lock him up. And the sooner you put a pen to paper and lock in a number, the lower that number is going to be, because the longer you wait, the more the salary cap goes up, the more other deals come in. And so I think as soon as you're 100% confident, like, yep, everything is set, let's get it signed.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the world we live in when it comes to the quarterback contracts. You're going to spend. It's what it is. You're going to pay a quarterback. And we see even ones that you really need to see more out of when you talk about a Geno Smith and when you talk about Sam Darnold and what Seattle did. They were kind of testing, when it comes to what those players would transfer over to. And some of them work out, some of them don't. I think that we saw a Tua contract that people are kind of looking at right now that doesn't look very good. And then there's others that we're waiting. I know CJ Stroud's one of the names that it seems like the Texans want to wait to see him kind of have a prove it year this year. And so I do think that if you're leveling Caleb up to those quarterbacks, then most Bears fans are saying, yeah, lock this guy down. Like you don't want to lose Caleb Williams. And I think a lot of people would also say you want to see that one more year and maybe a little bit more consistency in it. And I think that's the main thing. I don't think we're asking for all of a sudden Caleb to have 40 touchdowns and 10 picks or anything crazy like that Matthew Stafford had. You just almost want to replicate, but maybe more than just some of the fourth quarter wins. You see the offense start rolling a little bit early, and you see just kind of Caleb replicate, especially what he was doing maybe down the stretch at certain moments against some of the tougher opponents from the start of the season. And I think that if you see that pretty early on, then most fans would probably be like, yep, as soon as you can, get this guy a contract, because we've seen how difficult it is to find a quarterback who can even get you to the postseason and let alone win a postseason game and be a part of that. And so I think that's one of the benefits that you do have is you've seen this kind of progression and all the boxes start to get checked of Caleb Williams. Lauren, you and I talked, the beginning of last season, we're like, I don't know if the win-loss record really matters. I think it matters more of kind of what Caleb improves on. And if we've seen the things that need to get better when it comes to not taking sacks and when it comes to kind of reading the field a little bit better. And I think we'd all agree that all of those things improve throughout the season.
Totally agree. It was a massive leap of growth from Caleb Williams from year 1 to year 2. We saw, as you guys said, just what it looked like with Ben Johnson. I think now going into the year 2 with Ben Johnson and seeing just what the offense is capable of and what Caleb is capable of, I lean towards, like, if it was due today, I'd put pen to paper. Obviously, they have that luxury of being able to wait another year. But if it was due today, I would feel confident at this point. And yes, as we're talking about this, you're staring at a free agency period where, the Cardinals are in trouble, the Dolphins are in trouble with Tua and Kyler, and obviously you don't want to be in that situation. But I don't feel like Caleb's going down that path. But, so I think, as you said, Taylor, they checked a lot of the boxes. Caleb checked a lot of the boxes last year. But where do you see this next evolution for Caleb this year to be 110% sure about putting pen to paper next offseason?
I think one of the things for me is the full control of the offense. And I think there were moments we saw that from Caleb this last year, especially, like I said, down the stretch when you had to go out and win a football game. You felt like, okay, this is Caleb Williams' offense. I think you want to see a little bit more of that. And you see, when you look around and you talk about the best quarterbacks in the league, and you mention a Josh Allen, for example, how he can just it feels like everything revolves around Josh Allen. And you don't want to technically be like, okay, well, Caleb has to do everything. The good thing for the Bears is you feel like he has a lot of weapons, and you feel like he has an offensive line that you can now build off. And yeah, there's the left tackle question right now. But outside of that, you're very confident in the offense. You're very confident in your play caller. And so all of those things to me kind of now lead to, okay, Caleb, show us that this is your offense and you can run everything and every part of it. And you see kind of the decision making, because some of that the accuracy at times down the stretch was still probably what we talked about the most. Sometimes it would the balls would sail a little bit, or he'd throw them so hard it felt like, okay, you didn't need to do that for a 10-yard pass. Those are kind of some of the things. Simmer down a little bit, get comfortable, and just have full control of the offense. And I feel like, to me, that's the next step. Once I see that, where I'm like, yep, this is Caleb's, I think. And I saw that down the stretch. I compare that to Trevor Lawrence in the final 5 games of this season. He was, going up to the line, doing a lot of stuff at the line of scrimmage, pre-snap, calling out blitzes, doing all of those things. And you could just see him kind of maneuvering the entire offense to make it work around him. And I think that is probably that next level for Caleb for me, which I think he can, because I do think we saw it in moments.
Yeah, I think a lot of this conversation is hard to separate from Ben Johnson as well. Like, not only do we want to see Caleb Williams' development individually continue another year, but also like Ben Johnson's offense continue to perform at a high level all around Caleb Williams. Because, Joe, when you mentioned, Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa this offseason, right? Like that's very fair, fear of like, well, yeah, we've seen teams give quarterbacks these massive contracts, and then a year, and at the time they thought, oh yeah, our future is set. We've got this guy, number 1 overall pick. Kyler Murray looks like a dynamic athlete, can do everything in that offense and be successful. And then you look back and try and figure out what went wrong. Well, one of the big things that went wrong in both those situations, and in a lot of situations, is turns out maybe you didn't have the coaching staff that you thought you had in place. The infrastructure wasn't all there either. And like, sure, if Tua had been better, would Mike McDaniel still have his job? Maybe, but I think there were problems in Miami that went beyond just Tua having some struggles there. And same thing with Jonathan Gannon in Arizona. Like, it wasn't just like bad quarterback ruined the head coach, and it wasn't just that head coach ruined the quarterback, right? Like, it was a combination of organizational issues that helped lead to those quarterbacks failing even after having gotten their great big contracts. And so, like, I think as one more year solidifies that, yes, Ben Johnson's not just a 1-year wonder as a head coach, that if, as long as teams haven't figured out his offense and he loses his juice this season, or the Bears defense falls apart, like, we need to see, like, organizationally another year of success with Caleb Williams as well. And I think it's that stability that gives you the confidence that you can lock him into that contract at that point and feel like, yeah, maybe even if he never becomes Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or whatever, like, he can still be a good quarterback. Like, I think about guys like Dak Prescott and Jordan Love and even Brock Purdy or Jared Goff, that like they're paid like just as much as any of the other top tier quarterbacks, even though they're not that top tier, but they're still good, reliable, solid quarterbacks because they're in more stable situations where they've had good supporting cast and varying amounts of good coaching for a lot of their careers.
I think it's a great point, because someone that Taylor brought up there was Trevor Lawrence, and as you talk about the coaching, it's hard not to think of Trevor, and it's like, okay, they put pen to paper, and it's immediate. It's like, well, this contract stinks. Their Jags are screwed. But then he gets Liam Cohen for a year, and it's okay. He's back on path to where He's had multiple top 10 MVP finishes now. It looks like you're good with paying Trevor Lawrence $55 million. I am curious when you think about the dynamic of next offseason, though, with Daniels, May, Nix, all potentially on the same path as Caleb Williams. I think the Stroud extension also comes next season if it happens. I don't think they get that done this year. So, Lauren, when you factor in potentially 5 quarterbacks getting paid next year, do you think there's a sense of urgency that when next offseason comes, it's like, you got to get this thing done first before everyone else?
It's like a race.
It's a race to put pen to paper for everyone.
Yeah, whatever that first day is that they're legally or within the rules allowed to get the extension, like I want to be the first one, because the moment Drake May signed, and especially with Caleb as the number 1 overall pick, right? The moment Drake May signs the contract, it was like, well, I was picked before him. Jaden Daniels, I was picked before. Like, he was literally picked before all of these guys. And sure, we got to see what all their numbers are this season, right? I mean, as much as we try not to put too much weight in box score stats when it comes to agents and contract negotiations and who's made the Pro Bowl and all these things that don't really matter, but all of a sudden they only matter when we come to contract negotiations. Like, sure, one or more of these quarterbacks may have a broader, like, statistical argument of here's all the games I've won, or here's the yards I've thrown, or the touchdowns compared to that guy, like that's going to be a factor in there. But the first one to sign will set the beginning stage, the anchor point of the market for the rest of them. And like, we're legitimately going to be looking at, $55 million a year. Like, that's what Jordan Love got. That's what Trevor Lawrence got. That's what Josh Allen and Joe Burrow are at currently. Like, that's probably going to be the starting point for a lot of these guys. If you're in this category of, yes, long-term franchise quarterback, it's $55 million a year. I think the good news for Chicago is that you don't have to, you don't have to put that money in right away, right? You add 4 years for $220 million or whatever it is onto the end of the contract. So it's not like your price tag goes up right away, but you can choose to, if you want, take some of that money and pay for it now. So you're not paying as much down the line if you got the cap space now. But so there's some nice flexibility that you get from doing the extension early, because you're adding 4 more years and more money on, but you can move that money around to the current years and the future years, however you want to, either front load it or back load it as you fit.
Yeah, and I think like part of what you just said, Lauren, is just it's unpredictable because we don't know this time next year what we're talking about of how deep each of these guys got in the postseason. At this point, you're talking about Drake May just went to the Super Bowl, so that's the conversation surrounding that. And so, yeah, Caleb may say, "Well, I was picked first," and Drake's going to say, "Okay, well, I just got to the Super Bowl." Granted, it wasn't probably the best path in the postseason when it comes to quarterback play, but it's so unpredictable to say what that is. I think realistically, though, you're hoping that Caleb is worth the most, because then that means this season was even better than what we could have expected, And so it's that kind of, I don't care what they're going to pay Caleb Williams. I want the quarterback that feels like your franchise quarterback, and you have him locked in. And we are over having this conversation every 3 years of who the quarterback for the Chicago Bears is going to be. And so to me, if next year, this time we're saying they're like, yep, Caleb's worth $60 million, then I'm like, heck yeah, because that means you found a quarterback that is valued super high in the NFL when it comes to those contracts. And a big thing, you're also paying for what you're going to get. And that's a big thing that I think people forget with contracts. They're always like, well, he hasn't done this yet, or hasn't done that, or he's only won 1 playoff game. But you're paying for what you're kind of projecting that player to be. And if you're talking about next year paying Caleb $55, $60, $65 million, then that means that projection is showing that you're going to win, and you're hopefully some Super Bowl runs, but you're being a contender for the future.
And the number thing there is interesting too, because like it really shouldn't matter that much whether you're giving him 55, 60, or even 65 in there. Like, the difference between an extra $5 to $10 million of cap space a year, yeah, it's not nothing, but like if you've got your franchise quarterback, it won't matter at all. And vice versa, if you're wrong and for some reason he totally flames out, like, you're not that much more screwed at 65 than you are at 55. You're screwed either way. At that point, there's no like hemming and hawing and trying to cut corners and save a buck here and there. Like, we've seen some teams foolishly try and get in that game with their quarterbacks and end up having to pay way more down the line because you waited so long. Like, no need. Like, you're handing him a blank check per se, but I'm not fighting him if he says, make me the highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now. I can't say no, because the next guy that gets the next deal is going to be the new highest paid quarterback, and he'll be more affordable, 2 or 3 years from now.
I don't think this guy deserves as much of a full segment, because I think the answer is a little bit easier, but I'll just throw him in here as well, because also a top 10 pick. As confident as I am in Caleb right now, feel pretty comfortable saying if the season ended today and it was next year, I'd only be giving Roman Dunze the 5th-year extension. I wouldn't be talking about a big contract for Rome Odunze next season, like we are with Caleb. Taylor, do you agree with that, or are you more open to like seeing a future deal in place for Rome in next offseason?
Yeah, and obviously I'm like one of the biggest Dunze fans out there, but I do think you would want to see a little bit more, just in the sense of, I mean, you had this hot start last year that felt like, oh my gosh, here's this Caleb and Rome connection. This feels like it's going to be the future. And then there was just a lot of drop issues. And I know he had that injury, so how much that factored into a lot of things, I don't know. When you're not practicing weekly, which he was limited a lot of the practices throughout the week, and then we ended up finding out about that foot injury. So those things factor in. But you know, that's when you start to evaluate what is excuses and what's reasons. Is that affecting you catching the ball? What is it really looking at? And I think that because of that, I think almost solely because of drops, I say we need to evaluate a little bit more, because it hadn't been an issue before. But you don't want a player who's consistently having, I mean, end zone drop affected a playoff game. And like, that's not something that you really want to have to tolerate. So I do think that you have to see another season out of Rome. If we were making that decision right now, you would have to say, okay, Rome, we got to see one more year, because some of the things, the first half of the season looked great. The second half looked like it needed a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if he's getting an extension, he's going to want number one wide receiver money. And he has looked at times like a number one wide receiver, but like he's not getting the $25-30 million a year that he's looking for without having 1,000-yard type of season, right? And okay, it's not about this specific number per se, like he's injured and et cetera, but like still, like you got to see him like really fully put it all together and do it. And we just haven't quite seen the full picture come together.
All right, let's take our first break here. When we get back, we are less than a week away from NFL free agency. The legal tampering period opens up on March 9th. What are you hoping that first move the Bears makes is? We'll get to that next year on the Bears Squad Show. Today's episode of the Bears Squad Show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. All right, Taylor, I'll start with you here. Free agency, how you feeling about the Bears, and what's that first move you're hoping that they're going to make?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest conversation we're going to be having in general is the defensive side of the ball, and which of those defensive positions they feel the need for most. And I think you can make an argument for several of them. The Tremaine Edmunds conversation is going to be a part of it. It seems like he's gone, and whatever fast I've seen mock trades about a Max Crosby, and I've seen just, releasing him. So however that looks, it seems like that. And then I do think, so you do feel like that linebacker room is important, but then you're talking about safeties. Is Kevin Byard and Brisker both gone? Then you have that conversation. And then there's just a lot that's not even mentioning the defensive line, which we know needs a lot of work in general. So I think just this whole offseason is going to be a lot of conversation revolved around the defense. But for me, I think you've just got to get that defensive line right. And I know you tried in a few ways this last year with Dio and with Grady and some of those things. And maybe you saw a little bit out of Booker that they liked towards the end. But I think at the end of the day, you really have to start to solidify that defensive line up front. So, and we talk about some of John Franklin Myers. He's one that I like a lot, that he may be priced out of what the Bears can afford. And that's part of the problem when it comes to that. There's some other defensive tackles, interior guys that I think could possibly fit. I know a name I mentioned a few weeks ago when we did this was Nick Cross. It seems like the Colts are not going to keep him. That's a name that I think I'm keeping an eye out. I think he fits that Dennis Allen scheme pretty well, and he's versatile. And so that's something that obviously they like in Chicago when it comes to that. So when you talk about probably safety, defensive line, I'm not sure edge rusher when it comes to free agency, unless, like I said, it's some crazy trade. Right now, the Bears are favorites to get Max Crosby, betting favorites at least. So we'll see what that looks like. But I think that interior defensive line and that safety room, you really have to address. And I think that there's a lot of options that you can get. You just got to get it right. And that's the problem is you tried last year and you spent a lot of money last year on those areas and it didn't really pan out. So how much do you trust the free agent group this year and fixing it and patching it up that way? I don't think we see the money spent this year that we did last year. Number one, you just don't have it. But I think that you may lean more into the draft this year, but get like, two, three pieces that you can just kind of patch up and hope that maybe some of these guys pan out. And then maybe one big trade if you can manage something like that.
Yeah. I want to see Ryan Poles come out and can I say be aggressively shrewd? Like come out and I remember a couple of years ago in free agency, I think it was wasn't TJ Edwards one of the first signings announced when the free agent window opened? It was a relatively affordable, good deal. And it was wow, the Bears were first to market on, and obviously had tampered quite a bit with a pretty affordable contract for a solid veteran, got out before it wasn't the top of the market, but didn't get in on the bidding and just said, here's a guy here's a price we agree on. We like him. He's not breaking the bank. He's not changing our life, but just a good player to plug him in there. That's what I want to see Ryan Poles come out and do. I certainly don't expect that they're going to sign someone like Trey Hendrickson. He's just going to cost too much. And even John Franklin Myers, there's murmurings coming out of the combine. He could get $20 million a year in free agency. The Bears this year, the salary cap hits for Montez Sweat is $25 million. Odengbo is $20.5 million. And Grady Jarrett is just under $19 million. They can't and won't put in another $18 to $20 million a year contract individually on any of these players. So to me, it's going out and maybe just say, hey, can we find an older veteran that certainly isn't what he used to be, but can be a bridge to whatever rookies we're going to draft this year, whether it's a former Dennis Allen defensive tackle like David Onyemata from the New Orleans Saints, who's with the Falcons this past season, or Sheldon Rankins, another former Saint who was with the Houston Texans this past year, or one of the older edge rushers. I mean, Mack and Bosa are probably still going to be a little more expensive than the Bears want to pay, but it's just one of these guys that it's not super sexy and you're they're probably past their prime and they're not as good as they used to be, but they're more affordable and they can help you get through to not feel like you have to use a first round pick on an edge rusher or a defensive tackle. But if you get one in the second or third or fourth round, this veteran that you sign can kind of help bridge them along so that next year, that rookie that you draft this year steps into a bigger role.
Yeah, I will say on Monday when we got the report from, I think, Ian Rappaport that Khalil Mack was for sure going to play football in 2026, Bears Twitter lit up a little bit. He seems to be one of the free agency darlings. I think for the most part, Bears fans have tempered their expectations with Hendrickson. Not Crosby. Crosby is still is the dream, but I think Hendrickson, people have kind of realized, okay, this is not a really realistic move for the Bears to make. And if that's what your expectations are for the Bears, I think we got bad news for you. It's probably not going to happen. I'm still not even totally convinced Cincinnati doesn't find a way just to keep him at this point. But Khalil Mack's one for me that I'm still really hopeful for. Or Bosa. I'd be fine with these, Lauren, as you said, either of those guys being a fit here. One of those where maybe you can let the market play out a bit. So I think for me, the first move is, maybe it's not the first move they make, but I am curious what the free agency safety market looks like. Just after what happened at the combine, where it feels like there's three guys who secured themselves as first or second round picks. I want that buyer deal done, Taylor, as quickly as possible for me.
Yeah, and that one I was just about to say, the buyer deal, Lauren, reminds me a little bit of what you were just saying with TJ Edwards when he made that, because Xavier McKinney was the one that everyone was go get, we want him so bad. I don't care how much you have to pay him. And then when the Bears didn't get him and got Kevin Byard, there were some people who were disappointed, but that contract was half of what it was. And obviously it's panned out in ways there was some ups and downs, but I think that for the most part, people would say that the contract felt worth it for Kevin Byard. So it reminds me of that, because I think it was the same year, right? It was Edwards and Byard that same year.
I think so. Byard was a cap casualty for the Eagles, so they got to sign him a couple days before free agency. And wasn't there a running back or something? There was another position right around that time, a backup that they also signed as a cap casualty, or tight end. I don't remember who it was. Was it Gerald Everett?
I think that sounds right.
Yes.
I think it was Gerald Everett.
Which at the time I thought was good value too.
Same here.
Very wrong about, but yes. One quick note on the edge rushers. I find myself bracing for the Bears to not really sign an edge rusher, to maybe more replace Dominique Robinson than find a new starter, because like when you just look at the roster right now, you've got under contract Montez Sweat, Dio Odengbo, Austin Booker, and Ryan Poles made it sound like they see Shamar Turner as a defensive end. So if you've got 4 defensive ends under contract, like the phrasing he said at the combine was that, we were trying him at some different positions and it seemed like things were really coming together at end for him before he got hurt. So that doesn't guarantee that they're going to for sure put him at defensive end, but it sounds like that's probably where they're going to keep things going because they want those ends to kick inside. So anyway, you've got your top 4 defensive ends in a rotation, like right there. Like, yes, you absolutely would love to add Mac or Bosa as the new starter and push Odengbo down and did have a really deep group there. But I just kind of get the impression the way he talks about the confidence in Odengbo coming back and confidence in Turner coming back, and you got Booker and Sweat, that like, I don't think it's going to be a priority for them to find a new starter there. Maybe a good rotational pass rush for sure. I would like to get somebody else added in that group, but like, it's tough because, okay, then that means you got to invest in defensive tackle, but that free agent group is a lot thinner. Like after John Franklin Myers, you get a little rough there. So maybe they don't end up spending a ton on the defensive line in general, and maybe that is more linebacker and safety money as opposed to the investment we're looking for up front.
Well, and let me ask you that, Lauren, because coming from the combine, we talked about it. We obviously hopped on here right after Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson talked. And Ryan Poles mentioned something, I can't remember the exact way he worded it, but something along the lines of the edge position was deeper than interior defensive line in the draft this year. So how did you take that? Did you take that as, okay, then you have to try and get that interior defensive line in the first round or you're not going to get one? Or did you take that as maybe we don't expect a whole lot in that area?
Yeah, I think I think he has wisened up well enough to not feel like, oh, I've got to take X, Y, or Z position in the first round. But I think it's more about an understanding of like, I know I can't wait until, day 3 and find a starting caliber player there. Whereas like, I think there've been times in previous drafts, like even running back last year, right, where you feel like, oh, later in the draft, I can find a guy I really like at this position. Or, oh, like they could find Luke Newman in the 6th round and he's a guy that they feel comfortable playing regular season snaps at times at left guard. Like not a starter, but so understanding the depth of the draft is saying, if I want to get a starting caliber player here or a rotational player that's going to contribute as a rookie, I can only go this many rounds into the draft. And I don't think he's going to feel the pressure to say, I got to do it in the first round necessarily, but it's more an understanding of what he can't get away with waiting too long to do. But he did say in a different interview that this is the smallest draft board he has had in all of his years as a Bears general manager. Like he said, maybe 120 players on his board this year. Like overall, he does not see this as a deep draft in general. So I'm expecting that they're going to really prioritize those first 4 picks, and then the 5th and 7th round picks, don't be surprised if they're more willing to trade them away or trade up and use those and kind of say, if we have them, we'll take a flyer on a guy, but not counting on getting as much talent later in this draft as earlier.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I listened to that McShay interview because you recommended everyone listen to it. It was really good. It was really interesting. I'm really curious about who the player he was or coach was talking about at the end of the interview. I think it was a coach.
I think so too.
He called him an a-hole, is the nicest way I can say it.
Yes. Yes.
And he, held on to him too long. Thought that was very an interesting little nugget that he dropped in without naming names. It was probably the most uncomfortable I've ever heard Ryan Poles in an interview because he wanted to tell a story, you could tell, but as he says, like, I don't want to name names. But I was like, I do. I want you to
tell us. Hold on, so I missed this.
Yeah,
I didn't get to listen to this. So what was it?
It was Todd McShay's podcast. He had Ryan Poles on from the combine, and he asked him about like what he's learned or a mistake he's made that he looks back on in a general manager. And he said something along the lines of, like when it comes to previous staffing decisions, maybe holding on to someone that I shouldn't have held on to for so long. And he described him as the genius asshole, where it's like the smart asshole, where it's like, he's morally smart and is good at his job and knows what he's doing, but just the culture fit and the people fit isn't quite right there. And so I don't know that I don't know. Shane Waldron was the first name that came to mind for me, but I don't know if he quite qualifies as the first half of that equation. So I'm not
genius part.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I don't know if Eberflus would qualify either as the genius part, but yeah, it was interesting. But I saw, when he made that comment, Lauren, about it being such a short board, a small board for him this year, and then I look at NFL.com yesterday and Lance Zierlein, who I work with, look at his mock draft, and there he has the Bears not drafting in the first round. He has them trading their first round pick to the Dallas Cowboys. And I was like, wow, like maybe, I know Lance is very well connected. So I'm like, maybe there's something there to where, Ryan Poles doesn't really believe in this draft class because it does feel like some of the guys we'll talk about later in combine standouts that, I know I want the Bears to take, feel like they're going to be gone by the time the Bears are at 25. So it's going to be a fascinating free agency and draft as we are just, 6 days away from the legal tampering period opening up. But one of the first things that has to get done is the future of Tremaine Edmunds. We'll discuss that next here on the Bears Squad Show. Today's episode of the Bears Squad Show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. The minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need that right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by you saying you heard about it on Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. So I think in a surprising twist, there actually might be a trade market for Tremaine Edmunds. Lauren, I didn't think when we first talked about this, it felt real at all. It was like, this is a pipe dream that you're going to get any kind of draft capital, even if it was a 6th, 7th round swap. But reportedly, there's at least 3 teams that have some kind of interest. The Raiders, the Titans are 2 of them that might be looking at his services. So, Lauren, just where are you at today with, are you expecting a trade? You still feel like he's going to get cut? Where are you at with Edmunds?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by a trade at this point, given the interest that has come. I mean, I was with you for sure that I didn't think there would be a ton of interest, but the fact that there's multiple teams in this conversation leaves that door open. And, you start to look at the free agent linebacker group and say, okay, some of these guys are going to get some big contracts. Devin Lloyd will probably get more money than Tremaine Edmunds currently makes. The guys like Devin Bush or Nakobe Dean could start to push closer to Tremaine Edmunds' numbers. And if you kind of look at them and say, well, rather than getting a bidding war there, I know exactly what my cost will be for Tremaine Edmunds. And if things go well, I have the chance to give him an extension and, potentially move money around that way. And it's not going to cost you all that much to trade for him. So I can see why teams are at least kicking the tires and interested there. But at the end of the day, you are trading in the NFL. You trade contracts just as much as you are trading players, and whoever trades for him is going to have to pay him $15 million this season. So it's not like they're getting a steal. So they're not going to be giving up any kind of premium draft pick for him. It's going to be a late round swap there.
Taylor, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, and especially you talk about Devin Lloyd, and that's what's interesting to me when it comes to him, because Devin Lloyd had a great season, at least first half. I think that he got injured, and then when he came back from the injury, things kind of came back down to earth a little bit. It was almost similar in the sense of him and Tremaine both got a lot of interceptions this year. And so when you're looking at a linebacker and the amount of picks they were able to get, I think that kind of flashes. So I could honestly see some teams being like, all right, well, we've seen Tremaine Edmunds do it more, at least. Devin Lloyd previous to this year had a lot of nicks on he can't drop back into coverage. He struggles into coverage. He wasn't the surest of tacklers. They were like, maybe the team that gets him needs to use him as more of a blitzing linebacker, situational. And that was kind of the conversation of Devin Lloyd coming into the season. So because of those conversations about Lloyd and how much people are probably going to have to pay a Devin Lloyd, the more I've talked to people, the more I'm like, well, Tremaine kind of makes sense for some people then, because I do think that you see the value. And as much as I think we went in and the expectations were so high, I think for Tremaine Edmunds in Chicago, that a lot of us look at that value as not as high as it should be. But other teams may be looking at it and being like, look, you've seen Tremaine play a good amount of high level football at times. And you've seen him this year get the interceptions that you'd like him to see. You'd like him to get, there's a lot of things. There was areas, I want to say last year, the year before, he was one of the top linebackers when it came to the quarterbacks avoiding their side of the field. And so that was part of it, where it's like his numbers weren't crazy, but that's because nobody would throw the ball towards or run at Tremaine. And so maybe other teams are looking at that and they see value in it, of just like the experience of that type of linebacker. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the number looks like of what they, what the trade value would be. But I'm not totally shocked the more conversations I've had with some of the linebackers in free agency and the amount of teams that feel like they have a need for a linebacker.
Yeah, I was looking back at some recent linebacker trades. At the trade deadline, the Bengals traded linebacker Logan Wilson to the Cowboys for a 7th-round pick. And this time last March, the Cowboys traded a 6th-round pick to the Titans for Kenneth Murray and a 7th-round pick. And I think the year before there was a linebacker that was like a 6th, 7th-round pick type of swap. So like that's generally been, it was Ernest Jones went from the Rams to the Titans for a 5th-round pick swapping for a 6th-round pick. So like that's kind of been generally the market. Like maybe Tremaine's a better player than those linebackers, but he's also more expensive and in a 1 year last year of the deal. So the value, it becomes tricky to kind of square there to get much more than what those guys were getting.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I'm hopeful that it is one of those teams like the Raiders or the Titans. So if it is a 5th-round pick, it's almost like a 4th. If it's a top 5 pick in the 5th round, at least it's towards the top of that. We saw the Texans do that with Titus Howard. They end up getting, I guess, no, they had the Raiders, so it couldn't be a 5th-round pick from the Raiders because that's what the Texans end up getting from Cleveland. But it's that kind of deal where it's like as early in the round as possible is obviously better for you. I am curious, like now, I don't know. I'm still pro moving on from Edmunds. I did have a small part of me that I was like, man, like if there are other teams interested in him, is it the right move just to save money for the Bears to move on from Edmunds before we know what comes next in free agency and the draft? So I'm still like 90% this is the right decision for the Bears, but about 10% of me, Lauren, is now a little hesitant of just like, well, if he has a value, maybe the Bears shouldn't be so quick to move on.
Well, at the end of the day, he's the 3rd highest paid linebacker in the NFL in terms of average annual salary there. I think maybe because he's at 17.5 this year, they might be slightly down in the overall current year cap hit, but like still, this is a player who's paid as a top 5 player at his position and is not performing like a top 5 player at his positions. When you combine that with the need for salary cap clearance and also the ability for the Bears to seemingly find replacements with, I don't want to take it for granted and say relative ease, but like guys like DeMarco Jackson and Noah Sewell and even Jalen Reeves-Maybin filled in this season and were not horrendous by any means. And the drop-off was real, but not debilitating for your defense. It just feels like the value that you get from the $15 million in savings while being able to replace him with someone who's certainly going to be cheaper. How much cheaper we'll see, but like you're going to have some net savings and probably not a huge significant drop-off in level of play. It just feels like it makes too much sense, and especially everyone expects the Bears to release him if they don't trade him anyway. So at this point, like take whatever you can get for him.
So when it comes to the contract for him, what is the biggest difference? Like if they were to just release him compared to if they were to trade him, does the same, like, do they save the same amount of money and everything that comes into that? They would just also get a 5th or 6th or whatever.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's even the same. It's pretty similar post June 1st too. So I think anyway, or I think they maybe save a little bit more post June 1st. But if you want draft capital, you probably want it for this year. Well, maybe not. Like if Ryan Poles doesn't love this draft, maybe if it's draft capital for Edmunds, maybe it's 27 draft capital, and it actually makes it a little bit better of a pick. Maybe you could get a 4th-round pick if it's in 2027. Is that more appealing to you, Lauren, knowing what Poles said on that McShay interview?
100%. I mean, I'm generally a big fan of future future year draft picks because I don't know why the NFL universally downvalues them, right? Like sort of the rule of the trade chart, right, is that if it's a next year's pick, it's worth like a round later in terms of equivalent value. And it's like, it shouldn't be. Like a 1st-round pick's the 1st-round pick, whether it's next year or right now. Like, sure, I understand that. I think where this comes from is that in the NFL, if I'm a general manager, I don't know if I'm going to have my job a year from now. So I will put a higher value on the asset that I can use right now. Well, I know I'm for sure employed, as opposed to if it's a 2027 draft pick and things go poorly, I could be fired and then I'll never even get the benefit of this deal I made. So I suspect that's why future picks are valued lower. But like, if a team says, yes, we'll either give you a 5th rounder this year or a 4th rounder next year, I'm like almost always going to take that next year pick. I mean, the only time it gets tricky is if it's like a current second or a future first. Like if it's a super high pick, then we can start to have a conversation about which one's really better. But anytime I can get that future pick that's around earlier, that's a no-brainer for me.
Brad Biggs was on the Score the other day, and he really shut down the Jermont Dexter trade rumors. It was very much he's not getting moved. So that feels like a substantial update compared to what we were getting last week about Dexter. We just talked about Edmunds. There's still a lot of rumors floating around about DJ Moore and Tyson Bagent. Taylor, just in this next week, if I set just the trade number at just a half, so it's just, is there less or more than one at this point? Do you feel like we're going to see at least one trade in the next week? And if so, maybe how many potentially do you think the Bears could be making?
Yeah, it's funny because a week ago, I probably would have said like over one, maybe over 1.5, maybe. I feel like it's decreased a little bit for me. And I know you said maybe your opinions changed on some of the thoughts when it comes to a Tremaine Edmunds. I guess it would depend on what people are offering. If people were saying, hey, we'll give you a 4th next year, I think that Ryan Poles would do that. But by the way that he has talked about this draft, I don't know if he wants somebody's 5th or 6th round pick. He might just be like, let's just be done with this, clear this cap space that we need and not have to deal with that contract anymore if he's not valuing this draft very high. And you feel like that's just kind of filler spots. And then for me too, it's like the DJ Moore thing. It almost feels like something really like a package, something really big or nothing. Like you're either going to have DJ or DJ and other things are going somewhere for a Crosby or some sort of big trade in that element. And so that's kind of where I lean. So it's almost less now because of just kind of some of the things we've heard and their value of free agency and their value of the draft this year and what they're seeing in that. And also, I mean, I think that a lot of the value, we heard them talk about Tyson Bagent. The one thing I read, I think it might've been Big saying, I can't remember who it was actually, but they were asking for a 2nd round pick for Bagent. And so to me, that's almost saying like, we really want to keep Tyson Bagent, but if you want him that bad, then you're going to give us a high draft pick. And that's the only way. And a lot of teams are going to say no to that for a guy that's played as little games in the NFL as Tyson Bagent has. So it almost feels like they're deterring people from wanting to trade with them this year unless they're giving up some sort of higher draft capital because they feel like the value of their players like a DJ Moore and a Tremaine may feel higher than what people are willing to give up. And in that case, that it doesn't feel worth it to them, which I feel like I'm starting to lean towards that way for a lot of guys too.
Yeah, I think the key question here is time, right? Is like, will the trade happen in the next week? I don't know because I think there's a few other dominoes to keep an eye on for these types of trades. I do think Tremaine Edmunds probably gets traded in the next 7 days, but then beyond that, like I think the DJ Moore potential for a trade is also going to continge on the Eagles and AJ Brown. Like if a team if a team makes a big deal for AJ Brown, well then DJ Moore's kind of the consolation prize, the 2nd place receiver, or if the Eagles kind of make it clear, hey, we decided we're not, we heard some offers, but we're not trading AJ Brown. Well, then all of a sudden, does DJ Moore become the bigger priority? Because it's not a super top heavy wide receiving free agent group. At least, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans did what Debo Samuel, I think. You can make a conversation for DJ Moore to be younger and better than a lot of the other options in free agency. So he could, with time, build up more value as teams see what else comes off the market. Like same with Tyson Bagent. Like, are the Cardinals going to jump at Bagent now, or are they going to go into free agency and say, okay, well, what does Malik Willis actually end up going for? And what does Daniel Jones, I guess he's going to get tagged, but like, what do these quarterbacks actually end up going for? And then decide, okay, now let's pull the trigger on Tyson Bagent because he's not going to be expensive for salary cap anyway. So there's no urgency to do that deal right away. So I do expect probably some kind of second trade happens at some point for the Bears. I just don't think both are going to happen right away. I think it'll be Edmunds sometime before the start of actual free agency, and then whether it's a Bagent or a DJ Moore type of deal, maybe happens a little bit later on in the process.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Like Edmunds gone, cut. It's going to happen. The DJ Moore point you made, Taylor, I think is really interesting. And I tend to agree, is that he's either a Bear or it's a big deal, and whether that is, like you said, Lauren, it's the Buffalo Bills, not getting AJ Brown and desperate. First of all, as you said, I would take DJ Moore over Mike Evans at this point because he's probably got 1 year left. Definitely over Deebo Samuel. Definitely over Tyreek Hill. So it does feel like you can wait out the market and allow DJ to become a much better commodity for you as everything plays out. But yeah, so I'm kind of the same way. The Tyson Bagent one is the one I struggle with the most, where I think it's a great point, Taylor. Just a second round pick for
That's
Tyson
crazy
Bagent.
to me. I'm like, go ahead if you want to give it to us. Yeah.
I just don't see it. I like Tyson a lot, but
I
I would just be kind of baffled if an NFL team, Lauren, decided, yeah, we're going to part with a second round pick who's played in 6 games.
I think it was 6 starts. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I think this is similar to when the Raiders came out and said for Max Crosby, we are asking for 2 first-round picks plus a Pro Bowl player. That's what they're asking for. And everyone says they're not getting that. That's Micah Parsons' price. They're not getting Micah Parsons' price. They may still trade Max Crosby and not get that level of compensation. So I think the Bears make it clear, hey, we want a second-round pick. I don't know that anyone's going to give them a second-round pick, but if a team comes, I know we've talked on this podcast before about conditional 4th-round pick that becomes a 3rd if he's the starter or whatever. I don't know if the Bears are saying second-round pick or nothing or no deal, but they're saying that's our asking price. Who's going to get the closest to it? So I think there's a possibility they move Bagent without getting a true second, but still get some pretty good draft capital value for him for a guy that, like you said, has barely played and is a lot of potential and not a lot of proven consistency.
I'm going to throw one more name at you guys, as this news is literally coming down from Adam Schefter. I'm just curious. The Minnesota Vikings reportedly are open to the idea of trading Jonathan Grenard this offseason as they deal with their cap space. So I guess a 2-parter here, Lauren. Are you on the side of you don't deal with the division, or are you okay with it? And also just your thoughts on the player and if that could be an option for the Bears if they were to miss out on a Max Crosby type.
Yeah. This to me feels like I would be all over this. I know he's coming. Yeah. I got it. Medicals, we got to kind of check in. But if I'm in charge of the organization, this is the type of pass rush upgrade I would very much like to make. I don't think Ryan Poles is going to put another, $20 million or whatever into the edge rusher position when you've already got Sweat at 25 and Odengbo at 20 or whatever the numbers are. I just don't expect the Bears will. Much more likely that the Vikings, they cut Javon Hargrave, the defensive tackle. I know he didn't have a good year, but much more likely that you get you take a flyer on a guy off a down year that's a little bit more affordable than the big splash trade. And I don't think Minnesota would send him in division anyway.
Taylor,
yeah, I don't think they would. I'd say heck yes. I love Jonathan Grenard. I remember when that trade was made and everybody was kind of bashing the Vikings. They were like, why would you send away Danielle Hunter and then get Jonathan Grenard? I was a big Grenard fan, so I would totally be down for it. I think you talk about he's played in different type of schemes too. He's played 3-4, he's played 4-3, so you have that versatility. The medical side you want to talk about, but I mean, he had back-to-back seasons with I think 12 and 12.5 sacks. This last year, it was only 3.5, I believe, but you talk about he only started 10 games. And so you were dealing with some injuries and that, but yeah, that would be definitely a heck yes for me, but I just don't see the Vikings wanting to do that to help us.
Yeah, no, I agree. Unless maybe Tyson Bagent.
Yeah. Do you guys want Tyson?
I want to circle back on that real quick. I just realized I was looking back through quarterback trades as we were talking here, just kind of see what kind of value might Tyson Bagent get or whatever. Are the Bears going to get more for Tyson Bagent than they got for Justin Fields? Because that's going to be
Justin got a 6th, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's wild as a concept. If you told somebody that 2 years ago, that's crazy.
I think they will. If they trade him, I think they will. I mean, Trey Lance went for a 4th a couple years ago. I know that was mid-season, right? But that
which is even crazier, honestly.
But I think the Bears might get more for Tyson Bagent if they actually trade him than they did for Justin Fields, which is bizarre.
Kenny Pickett went for a 5th. Geno Smith went for a 3rd. Yeah. That's kind of where I think Tyson Bagent should be, somewhere around that range. 2nd-round pick is wishful thinking for Ryan Poles.
Yeah.
All right, let's take
what was Darnold's? Darnold's was a 3rd too.
Darnold was a free agent.
I think there was something. Oh, he was a free agent. Okay, I thought he was picking up.
Yeah, wasn't he traded to the Panthers?
That's what I thought. I thought it was like a 3rd and a 7th or something. But maybe I'm totally wrong.
He went to the Seahawks. I'm sorry. Yeah, he signed with them as a free agent, but I don't remember. I think a 3rd to 7th sounds right.
Yeah, it does sound like it's at least in that ballpark at a minimum.
It was Cardinals acquired Sam Darnold from the Jets in exchange for 3 picks, a 6th, a future 2, and a future 4.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow. That's a lot for Sam. I mean, I guess it could have been a good move for him, but they didn't keep him.
Ryan Poles would take that deal for Mason Major in an instant. Future draft picks and a second round pick. Perfect.
All right, let's take our final break here. Let's talk about our combine standouts. Who you saw at the combine that maybe you're crushing on a little harder, or you feel like are a good fit for the Bears. We'll get to that next year on the Bears Squad Show.
This episode of the Bears Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. College basketball is nonstop, and hey, we're in March. That means big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From the early tip-offs to the late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board, and now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, mixing spreads and totals and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. And then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. So whether you want to ride with an Illini team that's doing pretty well, Purdue not doing too bad in the Big Ten as well, or if you're hanging on to your Northwestern Wildcats at the bottom of the standings, however you want to play, FanDuel has a way to follow along with all of your favorite action, your parlay, your style, now with even more upside behind it. So head over to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel. Play your game.
All right, guys, I'll start off here. I mean, when the combine's going on, you're seeing, it's still heavy Caden McDonald in mock drafts, but the one player for me that stood out, he's not going to be there for the Bears, but I think I'm in love with Dylan Thieneman. The safety, like a 4.36, I think it was 40. I mean, the tape itself is really impressive, but then you see the combine, what he did there. And look, this feels like a good safety class to address that in the first 2 rounds. I don't know if the Bears will be in position to take a safety because it feels like he might be gone before they're on the board at 25, and then the next 2 might be gone before you're on the board in the second round. So it might take some Ryan Poles maneuvering, but that was the guy that, to me, at the combine, I was like, I'm really hoping he falls to the Bears at 25, and you can really think of your long-term safety position, pair him with a guy like Byard, and be set for at least half your safeties for the foreseeable future. Lauren, you're there at the combine. Long couple days for you, but who stood out for you? You're like, okay, this guy feels like a fit for the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, on Thieneman for a second, like, I agree that it feels like it takes him out of the Bears draft range, but I hold on to some optimism there because we haven't really seen safeties go a lot in the first round. Like, even guys that are really well hyped and really well liked by, the online draft Twitter community. I mean, there was a lot of talk last year about someone like Malachi Starks going early in that first round. He ends up falling all the way to the Baltimore Ravens at 27 just because the league doesn't value the safety position nearly as much as it used to. Or even I was looking back through, I was trying to quick page the 2024 draft, the Caleb Williams year. I don't think there was a safety that went in the first round that year. And so if, Caleb Downs from Ohio State is the consensus number 1 safety, although there's reporting today that he may have a degenerative ACL in his knee and that could hurt his draft stock and maybe bring him down to the Bears range. But like, the point being, it's hard for me to envision 3 safeties going before the Bears pick at 25. If it's Downs, Thieneman, and then Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo, like, one of those 3 guys, in theory, should be there at 25. Like, it's just maybe this is just a truly special safety class, and they all go early because the league doesn't like the tackles or the receivers or whatever as much. But like, it feels to me like, yeah, there's a couple quarterbacks that are going to go first. There's a handful of receivers, a handful of tackles, a handful of edge rushers, a handful of linebackers, handful of like. If there's a position that could fall right into the Bears' hands here, safety to me feels more and more likely as defensive tackle in the first round starts to feel less and less likely at the same time.
Yeah, I think last year we saw several good ones when it comes to Xavier Watts obviously dropped. Even Andrew Makubo was dropped a little bit lower than a lot of people thought he would. And so I think that is a position. The one difference I think for me, and Brugler, I think, tweeted this. He said this could be a year for the first time where there is more safeties drafted in the first round than running backs, quarterbacks combined. And I think that is one of the biggest indicators. But if someone like a Ty Simpson starts to get more attention and he starts to move up and you're having those conversations, and then maybe a Jadarian Price, who I've seen some people mock in the first round also, if all of a sudden it goes from one quarterback and one running back to two of each of those. And then you do have an offensive lineman slip up and somebody wanting, a couple of linebackers, then yeah, I do think that safety position makes a lot of sense because it is something that we're going to be talking about a lot. Joe, in your sense, when you talk about the other guys behind, if we're talking about that next two safeties, would you be willing to reach a little at that spot if it feels like you're filling one of your biggest needs?
I'm very much with where the Bears are at. It's stay true to your board.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a safety and a defensive tackle and they're 5 spots apart, no matter how free agency goes, I'm just taking the best guy at this point. I'm not as high on Caden McDonald personally. I think he can stuff the run, but I think the Bears need a little bit more than that from that position. Does feel like Caleb Banks is going to be gone. So it's very much a best available. And then I think one of the Ty Simpson part of this is really interesting to me because I do feel like the Bears are in a spot where you could trade back with Ty Simpson, like Ty Simpson being on the board there at 25, if he's there still. I know McShay said he could see him going as high as 6 to the Browns all of a sudden yesterday, which is wild to me. But I'm very much like stay true to your board with where the Bears defense is at and not reach.
If best available at 25 is a left tackle, though, and say you reach,
yeah, good counter.
You got Braxton and Theo Benedict. Best available is a left tackle. You pulling the trigger?
At this point, I think I am.
I think so too.
I like Ozzie, but like I don't think he did well enough to say if this is the best player on my board, I have to pass. Like you have, we're still waiting on the Darnell extension. It's going to come at some point. I'm pretty confident. But like Jonah Jackson's not long for this team. Could Ozzie slide inside? Could whoever you draft at left tackle, like if it is a Caden Proctor, who people are saying could slide to the inside. So I think for me, if your best player at this point is a left tackle on the board, it's a yes for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think because of that question mark, if we were going into this where Ozzie's not injured, I think maybe that conversation shifts a little bit and you're a little more confident moving forward. But because of that injury, all of a sudden you're talking about, okay, well, when are you getting him back? If you get him back in 12, then what does that – how healthy is he? And did he play high enough to kind of be like, okay, well, for 12 weeks, we don't have him, but we're fine. And so it is interesting. I always feel like I have never been opposed to reaching a little bit though. And I will say that. And I think like previous examples of that, the Jared Verse year, I remember when the Bears were picking, everybody was like, no, I think that was pick 8 that year. And everybody's like, no, that's too high to pick Jared Verse. And I remember being like, I don't care if you feel like you're getting like a guy that can rush the passer, set the edge, do everything that you want your edge position to do. And then now look at Jared Verse. You're looking back and you're like, granted, the draft isn't a science, so it's not like that pans out every time. Colson Loveland, I think some people would say was, a little bit of a reach this last year. And it looks like it panned out for the Bears because their, the coaching staff felt like he fit the scheme the best. And so I think that sometimes a reach is okay if you feel like that player can plug and play right now in your offense or defense, whatever the case may be.
To get back to some combine guys, because I know, Joe, your question to me was combine guys, and I just
that's right.
Talked safeties even more.
We got plenty of time.
We just kept going.
The drive's not till April 23rd. We got plenty of time to get through this stuff.
Yeah. I find myself feeling like defensive tackle is less likely to happen in the first round because Banks will probably go before the Bears pick. Peter Woods from Clemson, you hope might be there, but probably goes before the Bears pick. Caden McDonald didn't help himself at all at the combine. I don't think he's a fit for exactly what the Bears want. Same with Lee Hunter from Texas Tech. So it kind of feels like they're in this no man's land between they'll miss the good ones and then too early to kind of get to the next round of guys that would fit them. But like a little bit later in this draft, like a potential 4th, 3rd round pick, depending on how far these guys start to rise. I really fell in love with Caleb Proctor from Southeast Louisiana, small school guy, but just a super explosive off the snap, kind of a freak athlete there. Or Zane Durant from Penn State, other guy, the same kind of build there. Like there's a nice blend of pass rushing, explosive defensive tackles in this range of the draft that I feel pretty good that if you miss out on them in the first round, you should be able to get some kind of one you like that fits a little bit more of what Dennis Allen likes. So like he got David Onyemata in the 4th round a number of years ago, and it feels like he could find that. I don't want to put that kind of expectations on it, but like that style of player and that kind of potential impact later in this draft.
Yeah, the Zane Durant was on my list too. I liked him a lot. And you talk about like everything they talk about is that explosive first step, which when you're talking about getting those interior guys that can get to the quarterback, that's what you're kind of looking for. He's also versatile. He can play like 1 to 3 tech, which we talk about the versatility on this defense and what Dennis Allen likes. So that Zane Durant was a name I liked a lot too. And I do think that there are some guys, and I mean, that's why I asked you earlier too about Pole's comment on the interior defensive line. Like, what exactly you felt his comment meant? Because I feel like you could take it a couple different ways, but I do think that I could see them addressing that maybe in the third and still being able to get someone that I think you could start right away.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fascinating draft process. The only thing that just popped in my mind I want to add to the left tackle question here, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, is we know what they've said about Ozzie, and we know what they've said about Dio Dangbo and being able to play this year. Lauren, do you trust them? Because that's my thing with the left tackle spot is I don't know when he's going to play. They seem confident he's going to come back this year, but the Bears butchered every single injury return possible this regular season. It's like I don't trust their medical staff right now. And that's why I'm open to a left tackle. I don't know if they're going to feel the same way because they feel confident in what they're doing medically of when guys will and will not return.
Yeah, the way Ryan Poles talked about Ozzie Trapillo, the question was asked, like, do you think he's ever going to play again? And he said, oh, yeah, we definitely think he'll be back, but probably going to miss at least the bulk of the season. So, like, I think they're planning on basically not having Ozzie Trapillo, that sure, he might play the last handful of games of the year just to sort of get his legs back from under him and kind of almost more like rehab, like I'm saying, okay, here, just get a couple of games of running so that you can be in the best position for 2027. So I don't think they're overly confident about Trapillo in particular making an impact this season. It's the Odengbo. Yeah, they think he'll be ready this spring or by training camp at the very latest. So I've heard this one before. If he's ready by training camp, I will be impressed, but I'm bracing for a ramp up period that begins at the start of training camp. And even throughout the preseason, we don't see a ton of him. And week 1 is really kind of like his full return.
All right, that will do it for this episode of the Bear Squad Show. We'll be back, myself, Lauren, and Adam, on Friday at 10 a.m. This crew back next Tuesday at 11 as we get closer to free agency. And free agency, well, the tampering period will be open. So maybe the Bears actually have some moves to discuss next week on the show. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and like us on YouTube or wherever you're listening to us as well. We'll talk to you guys next week. Peace.